My name is April, and I am 34 years old. For 7 years, I believed my marriage was the best thing that ever happened to me. Derek said he loved me every single morning. He brought me coffee in bed every weekend. He held my hand in public and kissed my forehead when I was sad. I thought I had found my forever person. But there were things I could not see. There were signs I ignored. When my grandmother Louise passed away and left me $5 million, everything changed. I never imagined the man I slept beside every night wanted me dead. I never thought my car keys would become the tool to expose the truth. Before we begin this story, let me know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. If you have ever trusted someone who turned out to be a stranger, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. This story might make you rethink everything you know about the people closest to you. Now let me take you back to where it all started. I met Derek at an art exhibition in downtown Denver on a crisp autumn evening 8 years ago. The gallery was small and intimate, filled with abstract paintings that I pretended to understand better than I actually did. I was standing in front of a canvas covered in bold red strokes when I heard a voice behind me ask what I thought the artist was trying to say. I turned around and saw him for the first time. He had warm brown eyes and a smile that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. He was confident but not arrogant. He listened when I spoke, which felt rare for the men I had dated before. We talked for 2 hours that night. He told me he worked in real estate, that he had grown up in a small town in Nebraska, and that he moved to Colorado for a fresh start. I told him I was a freelance graphic designer, that I had been raised by my grandmother after my parents divorced and lost themselves in their own separate lives. He seemed genuinely interested in my story. He asked follow-up questions. He remembered details. By the end of the night, he asked for my number, and I gave it to him without hesitation. Our courtship was everything I had dreamed love would be. Derek planned thoughtful dates. He took me hiking in Rocky Mountain National Park and surprised me with a picnic at the summit. He cooked dinner for me at his apartment and played soft jazz music while we ate. He sent me flowers at work just because it was Tuesday. He made me feel cherished in ways I had never experienced before. 1 year later, we got married at a small vineyard in Napa Valley. It was intimate, just close friends and family. My grandmother Louise flew out to be there, and she cried happy tears when she saw me in my wedding dress. Derek read his vows from a handwritten note, and his voice cracked when he promised to protect me until his last breath. I believed every word. Our life together after the wedding was simple but comfortable. We bought a modest house in the suburbs of Denver with a 30-year mortgage. I continued my freelance work from home, building a steady client base over the years. Derek climbed the ladder at his real estate company, working long hours, but always coming home to me. We talked about having children someday, but never felt rushed. We had time, or so I thought. My grandmother Louise was the anchor of my life. She raised me from the age of 6 after my parents split up. My father moved to Florida and started a new family. My mother chased one failed relationship after another until she eventually stopped calling altogether. But Grandma Louise was constant. She taught me how to bake apple pie from scratch. She showed me how to tend a garden and how to find peace in the quiet moments of life. Most importantly, she taught me to love myself even when no one else did. I brought Derek to visit her many times over the years. He was always charming with her. He helped her fix a leaky faucet once. He brought her yellow roses because I had mentioned they were her favorite. He sat with her on the porch and listened to her stories about the old days. Grandma Louise told me more than once that she was happy I had found a good man. She said Derek had kind eyes and a steady heart. I treasured her approval because her opinion meant everything to me. Derek's family was a different story. His mother, Linda, was a woman of few words, at least when it came to me. She rarely addressed me directly at family gatherings. She would talk to Derek about me as if I were not standing right there. She compared me to his ex-girlfriends, to the daughters of her friends, to anyone she deemed more suitable. I tried to win her over. I cooked elaborate meals for holiday dinners. I bought thoughtful gifts for her birthday. I complimented her home and her taste in decor. Nothing worked. His sister Brenda was worse in her own way. She was 4 years younger than Derek, unmarried, and constantly in need of money. She showed up at our house unannounced, asking for loans she never repaid. She wore designer clothes and drove a leased BMW she could not afford. She looked at my possessions with hungry eyes and made comments about how nice it must be to have a husband who provided so well. The truth was, I paid for most of my own things with the income from my freelance work, but I never corrected her. I told myself that every family had its challenges. I told myself that Derek loved me, and that was enough. I focused on our marriage and tried not to let his mother and sister affect my happiness. For 7 years, I held on to that belief like a lifeline. I had no idea it would nearly cost me my life. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon in late September. I was in my home office finishing a logo design for a client when my cell phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I did not recognize, but something told me to answer. A woman's voice on the other end asked if I was April Montgomery. When I said yes, she told me that my grandmother had been admitted to the hospital after suffering a major heart attack. I dropped my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely pick it up again. I drove 4 hours straight to the hospital where Grandma Louise was being treated. The entire drive I bargained with God, with the universe, with anyone who might be listening. I promised to be a better person. I promised to visit her more often. I promised anything and everything if she would just be okay. When I arrived, a nurse led me to her room, and my heart shattered the moment I saw her lying in that bed. She looked so small, so fragile, nothing like the strong woman who had raised me. She was awake when I walked in. Her eyes lit up when she saw me, and she reached out her frail hand. I took it and held on tight. She told me not to cry, that she had lived a good long life and had no regrets. She said her only wish was that I would be happy, truly happy, for the rest of my days. I stayed by her side for 3 days. I slept in the chair next to her bed. I read to her from her favorite book of poetry. I told her stories about my work and about Derek trying to fill the silence with something other than the beeping of machines. Derek flew out to be with me on the 2nd day. He held me while I cried. He brought food because I had forgotten to eat. He told me he loved me and that everything would be okay. In that moment, I felt grateful to have him. I felt like I had married the right man after all. Grandma Louise passed away on a Thursday morning peacefully in her sleep with me holding her hand. The nurse said she went without pain, and I chose to believe that. The grief that followed was unlike anything I had experienced. It was a physical weight on my chest, a constant ache that made it hard to breathe. I cried until I had no tears left. I could not eat. I could not sleep. The world felt empty without her in it. The funeral was small and simple, just as she had wanted. A few of her old friends came to pay their respects. Derek stood beside me the entire time, his arm around my shoulders. I leaned into him because I did not have the strength to stand on my own. After the service, we returned to her house, the house where I had grown up, and I walked through the rooms, touching the things she had touched, trying to hold on to whatever pieces of her remained. 2 weeks after the funeral, I received a letter from a law firm asking me to attend a reading of Grandma Louise's will. I had not thought about inheritance. Money was the furthest thing from my mind. I assumed she might have left me some jewelry, maybe the house, perhaps a few $1,000s from her savings. She had always lived modestly. She drove the same car for 15 years. She clipped coupons and shopped sales. I never imagined she had any significant wealth. The attorney's office was in a tall building downtown. Derek insisted on coming with me for support. We sat across from a man in a gray suit who shuffled papers and spoke in formal legal language. When he finally got to the point, I thought I had misheard him. He said Grandma Louise had left me her entire estate, which consisted of approximately $5 million in cash and investments, plus a house valued at $800,000. I sat there in stunned silence, trying to process what he had just said. The attorney explained that my grandmother had owned a small clothing manufacturing business decades ago. She sold it before I was born and invested the proceeds wisely over the years. She lived frugally, not out of necessity, but out of preference. She believed in saving for the future and in leaving something meaningful behind. That something was me. I was her only heir because she had no biological children. She had adopted my mother as an infant, and my mother had cut ties with her years ago, leaving me as the sole beneficiary. I looked at Derek sitting next to me. His face was calm, but something flickered in his eyes. It was a look I had never seen before, a brightness that seemed out of place given the somber circumstances. He squeezed my hand and told me that Grandma Louise must have loved me very much. His voice sounded sincere, but for a split second, I thought I detected something else beneath the surface. I dismissed the feeling. I was grieving and exhausted. My mind was playing tricks on me. In the days that followed, Derek asked a lot of questions about the inheritance. He wanted to know how the money would be transferred. He asked whether it would go into a joint account or my personal account. He inquired about taxes and investment options and whether I had spoken to a financial advisor. At first, I thought he was just being practical. He worked in real estate after all. Numbers and finances were part of his daily life. But there was an intensity to his questioning that felt different. He had never shown much interest in my finances before. Now suddenly he could not stop talking about them. The money was deposited into my personal savings account 2 weeks later. Derek suggested we open a joint account to make household finances easier. He said it would simplify things, that we were a team, that married couples should share everything. I hesitated. Something inside me resisted the idea, though I could not articulate why. I told him I needed time to think, that I wanted to process everything before making any major decisions. He seemed disappointed but did not push, at least not then. His family's behavior shifted dramatically after the news spread. Linda called me for the first time in months, her voice suddenly warm and friendly. She asked how I was doing. Why? She invited us over for Sunday dinner. She complimented my hair and my clothes and my work. It felt surreal coming from a woman who had barely acknowledged my existence for 7 years. Brenda showed up at our house unannounced one afternoon with an expensive bottle of wine and a box of fancy chocolates. She hugged me like we were old friends. She told me we should spend more time together, that she had always wanted a real sister. She suggested spa days and shopping trips and girls' weekends. The same woman who had looked down on me for years was suddenly acting like my best friend. I accepted her gifts with a polite smile, but inside, I felt unsettled. Derek's behavior changed too, though in more subtle ways. He became more attentive than ever. He bought me jewelry without any occasion. He booked a trip to Paris for our anniversary and talked about upgrading our house to something bigger. He mentioned that his company had some promising investment opportunities and wondered if I might want to diversify my portfolio through real estate. The suggestions came wrapped in love and care, but they kept coming, and they always circled back to the money. I found myself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering why everything felt different. I had just lost the most important person in my life. I should have been able to lean on my husband without reservation. Instead, I felt a creeping sense of doubt I could not shake. For the first time in 7 years, I started to question whether Derek loved me for me or for something else entirely. 3 months had passed since the inheritance. Autumn had turned to winter, and the days grew shorter and colder. Inside our home, something else was growing cold too. I started noticing things I had ignored before. Small things at first. Derek coming home later than usual with vague explanations about client meetings. His phone buzzing with texts late at night while he claimed it was just work emails. The way he angled his screen away from me when I walked into the room. One evening, I came downstairs to get a glass of water and heard him talking on the phone in his office. The door was slightly open, and I caught fragments of his conversation. He was speaking to Brenda. I heard her voice through the speaker, high-pitched and impatient. She asked him when he was going to get the money. He told her to relax, that everything was going according to plan. My stomach dropped. I backed away from the door quietly and returned to bed, with my heart pounding in my chest. I told myself there could be an innocent explanation. Maybe they were talking about something else entirely. Maybe I had misheard. Maybe I was being paranoid because grief had made me suspicious of everyone. I wanted to believe those things. I wanted to preserve the image of the man I had married. But a seed of doubt had been planted, and it would not stop growing. A few weeks later, Derek brought up life insurance again. He said we should update our policies since our financial situation had changed. He had already done research and found a policy that would pay out $3 million in case of death. The beneficiary would be the surviving spouse. He presented it as a responsible thing to do something all couples with assets should consider. He had printed out the paperwork and everything. All I needed to do was sign. I stared at the documents on the kitchen table. $3 million. If I died, Derek would receive $3 million on top of whatever he might inherit from my estate. The thought made me nauseous, but I did not want to accuse my husband of something sinister without proof. I signed the papers because refusing would have required an explanation I was not ready to give. I signed because I was still hoping I was wrong about everything. I called Joanna that night after Derek went to sleep. Joanna had been my best friend since our freshman year of college. We had drifted apart somewhat after I got married, but she was always there when I needed her. She worked as an attorney, now specializing in family law, and I trusted her judgment completely. I told her everything: the inheritance, Derek's sudden interest in our finances, the overheard conversation with Brenda, the life insurance policy. Joanna listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a long pause before she spoke. She said she did not want to alarm me, but the pattern I described raised serious red flags. She said that taking out a large life insurance policy shortly after a spouse inherits significant money was exactly the kind of thing investigators looked for in cases of foul play. She urged me to be careful. She told me to trust my instincts. I started paying closer attention after that conversation. I watched Derek more carefully, looking for anything that might confirm or deny my fears. One afternoon while he was at work, I went through his home office. I know it was wrong to snoop on my spouse, but I felt like I had no choice. I found bank statements showing he had transferred money to accounts I did not recognize. I found printouts from websites about estate law and inheritance rights for surviving spouses. I found a notepad with numbers scribbled on it, calculations that seemed to break down exactly how much money he would receive if I were no longer alive. My hands were shaking as I put everything back where I found it. I felt sick. I felt betrayed. But I still did not have concrete proof of any wrongdoing. Thinking about money and looking up inheritance laws were not crimes. I needed something more definitive before I could confront him. One night, I woke up at 2 a.m. and found the bed empty beside me. Derek was not there. I lay still and listened. The house was quiet, but I could hear faint sounds coming from downstairs. I crept out of bed and moved silently to the staircase. From the top of the stairs, I could see the door to the garage was open. A light was on inside. I wanted to go down and see what he was doing, but something stopped me. Fear, maybe. Or the instinct that knowing the truth would change everything. I went back to bed and pretended to be asleep when he finally returned an hour later. He slid under the covers without a word, and I lay there in the darkness with my heart racing, wondering what my husband had been doing in our garage in the middle of the night. The next morning, I checked the garage myself. My car looked the same as always. I did not know what I was looking for. Everything seemed normal. I pushed the incident to the back of my mind and tried to focus on work, but the unease never left me. It sat in my chest like a weight I could not lift. Joanna suggested I contact her cousin Kevin. He worked as a private investigator and had helped her with cases in the past. She said if anyone could find out what Derek was really up to, it was Kevin. I hesitated at first. Hiring a private investigator to follow my husband felt like a betrayal of our marriage. But then I remembered the calculations on that notepad. I remembered the life insurance policy. I remembered Brenda asking when he was going to get the money. I called Kevin and told him everything. He listened carefully and asked questions. He said he would start surveillance on Derek immediately and report back within a week. I thanked him and hung up, feeling like I had crossed a line I could never uncross. Whatever happened next, my marriage would never be the same. 1 week later, Kevin called me with his findings. His voice was serious and measured. He said Derek had visited a law office 3 times in the past week. The lawyer specialized in estate and probate law. Kevin had managed to confirm through a source that Derek had asked specific questions during one of those meetings. He asked what percentage of his wife's estate he would inherit if she died without a will. He asked about the legal process for accessing a deceased spouse's accounts. He asked how long it typically took to receive life insurance payouts. I could not breathe. I sat in my car in a parking lot because I could not drive after hearing those words. My husband, the man who promised to love and protect me, was planning for my death. He was calculating exactly how much money he would make when I was gone. 7 years of marriage, and I meant nothing to him. I was just an investment waiting to pay off. I spent 2 days in a fog after Kevin's report. I went through the motions of daily life, cooking dinner, answering emails, making small talk with Derek as if everything were normal. But inside, I was screaming. I was mourning the death of the marriage I thought I had. I was trying to figure out what to do next. The answer came unexpectedly. My car had been making a slight noise for a few days. Nothing serious, just a minor rattle I kept meaning to check. I finally took it to Marcus, a mechanic I had been using for over a decade. He ran a small garage on the outskirts of town. He was honest and reliable, the kind of person who never tried to upsell unnecessary repairs. I dropped the car off on a Thursday morning expecting a routine inspection. Marcus called me 3 hours later. His voice was different, tense. He told me I needed to come to the garage immediately. He said not to tell anyone where I was going. Just come now. I drove a rental car to his shop, my pulse racing the entire way. When I arrived, Marcus led me into the service bay without saying a word. My car was up on the lift with the wheels removed. He pointed underneath and asked if I saw those lines running along the frame. I nodded, not understanding. He said those were my brake lines. He said someone had cut them. I stared at the metal tubes he was pointing to. They were clearly damaged. The cuts were clean, deliberate, not the result of wear and tear or road debris. Marcus explained that the lines had been sliced about 90% through. They would hold for a while under normal driving conditions. But the moment I needed to brake hard, like on a highway or going down a steep hill, the lines would snap completely. I would lose all braking power. At high speed, that would almost certainly be fatal. I grabbed the edge of a workbench to steady myself. My legs felt like they might give out. Marcus asked if I knew anyone who might want to hurt me, anyone who had access to my car, anyone who might have been in my garage recently. The answer was obvious, but I could not say it out loud. Not yet. I asked Marcus to keep this between us for now. I told him I needed time to figure out what to do. He agreed reluctantly. He said he would document everything with photographs and write up a detailed report. He would not repair the brakes yet, so the evidence would be preserved. He warned me not to drive that car under any circumstances. I called Kevin from the parking lot of the garage. I told him about the brake lines. He was silent for a long moment before he spoke. He said we needed to check if there was any footage of Derek near my car. He remembered that my neighbor Harper had a security camera on her property that pointed toward the street. It might have captured something useful. Kevin went to speak with Harper that afternoon. She was a sweet woman in her mid-40s who had lived across from us for years. She always waved when she saw me and brought over cookies during the holidays. She agreed to let Kevin review her security footage from the past 2 weeks. She asked if everything was all right. Kevin told her he was helping me with a personal matter and left it at that. The footage was damning. Clear as day, there was Derek at 2:17 in the morning, 4 days before I took my car to Marcus. He walked out of our house and into the garage. The camera angle showed him opening the hood of my car and leaning inside. He stayed there for nearly 20 minutes before closing everything up and going back inside. His movements were calm and deliberate. He knew exactly what he was doing. Kevin brought the footage to Joanna's office, and I watched it on her computer. I saw my husband, the man I had loved for 7 years, sabotaging my car in the middle of the night. I saw him trying to kill me. The tears came, then silent and unstoppable. Joanna held me while I cried. She did not say anything. There was nothing to say. When I finally composed myself, Joanna asked what I wanted to do. She said we had enough evidence to go to the police. Derek could be arrested for attempted murder. This could end right now. But I wanted something more. I wanted Derek to expose himself. I wanted him to know that his own actions had brought him down. and I knew exactly how to make that happen. Brenda had been eyeing my car for years. It was a Mercedes SUV that I had bought with my own savings before the inheritance. She had asked to borrow it multiple times, and I had always refused because she had a reputation for reckless driving. Derek knew about her requests. He knew how badly she wanted to drive that car. If I offered the keys to Brenda, Derek would have to stop her. He would have to reveal that he knew something was wrong with the car. And when he did, his guilt would be undeniable. I shared my plan with Joanna and Kevin. They were hesitant at first. They worried about the risks involved, but I assured them I had no intention of letting Brenda actually drive the car. We would have safeguards in place. Kevin would coordinate with local police to intercept the vehicle if necessary. The goal was to create a situation where Derek would be forced to expose his own crime. I spent the next few days preparing. On the surface, I acted completely normal around Derek. I smiled at him over breakfast. I kissed him goodbye when he left for work. I even initiated physical affection to throw off any suspicion. Inside, I was cold. Inside, I was counting down the hours until I could watch his world fall apart. Joanna drew up divorce papers and kept them ready. She also prepared documentation for a criminal complaint. Marcus agreed to serve as a witness and provided a written statement about the condition of my brake lines. Kevin made copies of all the security footage and stored them in multiple secure locations. Harper signed an affidavit confirming the footage came from her property. We had built an airtight case. Now we just needed Derek to complete it. I told Derek I had been offered a big freelance project with a client in Seattle. I said I would need to fly out for a week and leave my car at home. Derek seemed pleased. He offered to drive me to the airport. He asked if I needed help packing. His solicitousness would have touched me once. Now it made my skin crawl. Before I left, I made a phone call to Brenda while Derek was in the room. I told her I was leaving my car at home and she was welcome to use it if she needed. I knew Derek could hear every word. I saw his face tighten almost imperceptibly. Brenda squealed with excitement and thanked me profusely. She said she had a party to attend that weekend and the Mercedes would be perfect. Derek drove me to the airport that evening. He kissed me at the curb and told me to have a safe trip. I walked through the sliding doors and waited until his car disappeared from view. Then I walked back outside and got into a waiting taxi. Kevin had booked me a room at a hotel 15 minutes from our house. I would be close enough to monitor everything. That first night, nothing happened. Derek stayed home. Kevin watched the house from a parked car down the street. I sat in my hotel room, refreshing my phone every few minutes, waiting for updates. Sleep was impossible. Every sound made me jump. The next evening, Brenda arrived. Kevin texted me in real time as events unfolded. Brenda pulled into our driveway at 7:30. She went inside the house and stayed for about 20 minutes. Then she came back out, heading for my car with the keys in her hand. Derek came running out after her. Even from a distance, Kevin could see he was agitated. He grabbed Brenda's arm and tried to pull her back. They argued in the driveway, their voices raised, though Kevin could not hear the words. Derek was shaking his head emphatically. Brenda yanked her arm free and pushed past him. She got in the car. Derek stood frozen for a moment, then ran to the driver's side window. He was shouting something, pleading maybe. Brenda ignored him. She started the engine and pulled out of the driveway. Derek stood in the street watching her go, his hands on his head like a man watching a disaster unfold. He pulled out his phone and called someone. Then he called again. Kevin assumed he was trying to reach Brenda, but Brenda was not answering. She was too busy enjoying her chance to finally drive my Mercedes. Kevin had already coordinated with 2 police officers who owed him favors. They pulled Brenda over about a mile from the house on a routine traffic stop. When they inspected the vehicle, they found the sabotaged brake lines exactly as Marcus had described. They impounded the car and informed Brenda that she was lucky to be alive. She had been minutes away from a potential accident. The police called me since I was the registered owner. I told them I was nearby and would come to the station immediately. I said I had evidence related to how the brakes were damaged. The officer on the phone sounded surprised but told me they would be waiting. I arrived at the police station with Joanna and Kevin by my side. We carried folders full of evidence. Marcus's report with photographs, Harper's security footage on a flash drive, Kevin's surveillance notes documenting Derek's visits to the estate lawyer, the life insurance documents, the bank statements showing mysterious transfers, everything we had gathered over the past weeks. The detective who met with us was a serious woman named Rodriguez. She reviewed our evidence methodically, asking questions and taking notes. When she watched the security footage of Derek tampering with my car, her expression hardened. She excused herself to make some calls. Derek was brought in for questioning an hour later. I was sitting in a waiting area when they led him through the hallway. He did not see me at first. He was talking to the officer escorting him, probably trying to explain away whatever story he had concocted. Then he turned his head and our eyes met. His face went white. He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. The officer guided him into an interrogation room and closed the door. I was permitted to observe through a one-way mirror. Joanna stood beside me as we watched the interview unfold. Derek started confident, insisting there had been a misunderstanding. He loved his wife. He would never hurt her. The detective let him talk. Then she showed him the footage. The change in Derek was immediate. His shoulders slumped. His hands trembled. He tried to claim the video was fake, manipulated somehow. The detective told him the footage had been authenticated and that forensic experts had examined my car. The cuts on the brake lines matched a specific type of blade. Did he own any tools like that? Derek's composure crumbled. He started rambling about financial pressures. His company was failing. He had debts nobody knew about. He just needed money to survive. He never meant for anyone to get hurt. It was Brenda's idea anyway. She was the one who came up with the plan. She told him how much money he would inherit if his wife died. She pushed him into it. The detective asked him to clarify. Was he saying his sister Brenda had helped him plan to kill his wife for her inheritance? Derek nodded frantically. He said Brenda had researched everything. She found out how much money would go to the surviving spouse. She told him the life insurance payout would be quick. She promised they would split everything once it was done. Officers brought Brenda in next. Her designer dress and perfect makeup looked absurd in the harsh fluorescent light of the interrogation room. When she saw Derek through the glass already in custody, she turned pale. The detective told her what Derek had said. Brenda immediately started blaming him. She said it was all his idea. She said she just went along with it because he pressured her. They turned on each other so fast it would have been almost funny if it were not so horrifying. Linda arrived at the station after receiving a call about her children. She stormed into the lobby demanding answers. When a detective explained the situation, she insisted it was all a mistake. Her son was a good man. Her daughter was innocent. This was clearly some scheme by April to frame them and steal their family. The detective showed her the evidence, the footage, the reports, the confessions. Linda fell silent. For the first time since I had known her, she had nothing to say. I stood up and walked into the main area where Linda was sitting. She looked at me with something between hatred and shock. I told her I had spent 7 years trying to earn her approval. I had cooked for her family. I had tolerated her coldness and her comparisons. I had stayed quiet while she dismissed me as not good enough for her precious son. And the whole time her son and daughter were plotting to kill me for money. I told her I no longer needed her approval or anyone else's. I knew my worth. My grandmother taught me that. And I would never again let anyone make me feel small. Joanna handed me divorce papers right there in the police station. I signed them without hesitation. Derek and Brenda were formally arrested. Derek was charged with attempted murder. Brenda was charged as an accessory. They were denied bail given the severity of the crime. I walked out of the police station into the late afternoon sun. The sky was turning orange and pink. Joanna and Kevin walked beside me. For the first time in months, I took a deep breath that did not hurt. The weight that had been crushing my chest was finally gone. I was free. The months that followed were not easy. Freedom does not erase pain. It just creates space for healing to begin. I sold the house in the suburbs. Every room held memories I did not want to carry anymore. The kitchen where Derek had kissed me good morning. the bedroom where we had slept side by side while he dreamed of my death, the garage where he had crept in the night with tools meant to end my life. I could not stay there. I would not. I moved into Grandma Louise's house, the home where I had grown up, the place where I had felt safest. Walking through her front door felt like coming home in a way I had not experienced in years. Her presence was everywhere, in the faded floral wallpaper she loved, in the garden she had tended with such care, in the kitchen that still smelled faintly of cinnamon and apples. The first weeks were hard. I woke up in the middle of the night sweating from nightmares. I saw Derek's face in crowds. I jumped at unexpected sounds. The therapist I started seeing said these reactions were normal. Trauma takes time to process. Healing is not linear. Some days I believed her. Other days I wondered if I would ever feel whole again. I threw myself into making the house mine while honoring what Grandma Louise had built. I repainted her bedroom in soft lavender, her favorite color. I planted new flowers in the garden alongside the roses she had grown for decades. I cooked her recipes sometimes, crying into the mixing bowl as memories washed over me. Slowly, the tears became less frequent. The smiles came more easily. Joanna visited often. She brought wine and takeout and stories about her chaotic law firm. She made me laugh when I thought I had forgotten how. Through her, I met new people, strong women who had survived their own hardships. We gathered for dinners and book clubs and long walks where we talked about everything and nothing. I built a community I had not known I was missing. I used part of the inheritance to establish the Louise Montgomery Scholarship Fund. It would help young women from difficult backgrounds pursue higher education. My grandmother believed in the power of learning. She believed everyone deserved a chance. This was my way of continuing her legacy of turning the money that had nearly cost me my life into something that would change lives for the better. The trial happened 6 months after the arrests. I did not attend. Joanna kept me informed, and that was enough. Derek was convicted of attempted first-degree murder. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Brenda was convicted of conspiracy and received 5 years. Their mother, Linda, sat in the courtroom every day, but she never testified. She never apologized to me. I did not expect her to. Some people cannot admit they raised monsters. I thought I would feel satisfaction when the verdicts came in. Instead, I felt something quieter. Closure, maybe. Or just exhaustion. I had spent so much energy fighting to survive and then fighting for justice. Now that the fight was over, I did not know what to do with all that space inside me. My therapist said that was okay. She said I would figure it out in time. I started taking pottery classes at a community center downtown. I had always wanted to try working with clay but never made the time. Now I had nothing but time. The teacher was patient and encouraging. The other students were friendly and unpretentious. I loved the feeling of wet clay between my fingers, the way it responded to gentle pressure, the meditative focus required to shape something from nothing. That is where I met Samuel. He was taking the same class, struggling even more than I was to center his clay on the wheel. We laughed at each other's lopsided bowls. We started grabbing coffee after class, then dinner. Then long walks through the park where we talked about our lives and our dreams and our wounds. He never asked about my money. He never pried into the details of my divorce. When I finally told him the whole story months later, he listened quietly and then held my hand. He said he was sorry I had gone through that. He said he admired my strength. He said he would never hurt me. I wanted to believe him. Part of me was afraid to. But I was learning to trust myself again, to listen to my instincts instead of silencing them. My instincts said Samuel was different. We took things slow. I was not ready to rush into anything. He understood completely. We built a friendship first, a foundation that was not based on infatuation or convenience. We learned each other's quirks and flaws. We had disagreements and worked through them. We created something real. A year after everything had ended, I stood in Grandma Louise's garden on a warm spring morning. The roses were blooming, birds were singing in the old oak tree. I closed my eyes and let the sun warm my face. I thought about everything that had happened, the love I thought I had, the betrayal I never expected, the strength I did not know I possessed. I thought about what Grandma Louise used to tell me. She would sit me on her lap when I was small and say that I should never let anyone else define my value. She said I was precious not because someone loved me, but because I was me. I understood those words differently now. I had spent years seeking validation from Derek and his family. I had twisted myself into shapes I thought they wanted, and none of it mattered because they never saw me as a person. They only saw what they could take from me. Now I saw myself clearly. I was a survivor. I was worthy of love that did not come with conditions or calculations. I was capable of rebuilding my life from the wreckage someone else had made, and I was grateful. Grateful for the friends who stood by me, grateful for the grandmother who raised me, grateful for the chance to start again. If you are in a relationship that makes you feel small or afraid or invisible, I want you to listen to your instincts. That quiet voice inside you that says something is wrong, it is trying to protect you. Do not silence it the way I did for so long. You deserve love that lifts you up, not love that plots your destruction. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who hurt us most. That is a painful truth, but it does not mean you should close your heart forever. It means you should open your eyes wider. It means you should trust yourself before you trust anyone else. It means walking away from someone can be the first step toward finding yourself. Thank you for listening to my story today. If any part of this resonated with you, I would love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever ignored red flags in a relationship? Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? Share your experiences in the comments below because your story matters too. If this video touched your heart, please give it a like. It helps more than you know. Subscribe to this channel if you want to hear more stories of survival and strength. And share this video with someone who might need to hear it today. You never know who is silently struggling and needs a reminder that they are not alone. I am sending love to each and every one of you. Take care of yourselves. Trust your instincts. And always remember that you are worth so much more than anyone else's opinion of you. Until next time.